Hello and hey, ladies and gentlemen. I am Professor Jellyfish and welcome to another part of Realism Review of Subnautica. This is a series where I will be examining the creatures in Subnautica and try to figure out how realistic they are when compared to real-life animals. This is a series that will not only look at the design and look at the creatures, but I will also consider the biomes and environments that they are found across in the game's world. This time we will be having a look at Boneshark. Like the previously discussed Stalker, this shares some traits with sharks, but unlike the Stalker, there are some traits that are shared with the prehistoric predators. Specifically, the Dunkleosteus genus that went extinct about 358 million years ago. Traits that seem to be inspired from the Dunkleosteus seem to be the armored plating surrounding the animal. But now I am getting ahead of myself. So let's have a look at the general traits of the Boneshark. It has a thickly armored skeleton. It is described as being a defensive adaptation against larger predators or other individuals of the same species attacking it. There is mention that this trait is being shared with the sand shark and that they might share a common ancestor, but that is a subject for another video. The eyes are large and very sensitive to light and suggested for aiding in hunting animals with bioluminescence when other light sources are diminished. The behavior of the Boneshark is described as slow, with the capacity to swim at great speed in order to catch prey or defend its own territory. It also seems to live in small groups. So let's go over these traits. First, I want to talk about the armored exoskeletons. When compared to the Dunkleosteus, we might spot something rather interesting, and it relates to how the swimming of oceanic creatures develop defenses. One of the major differences is that the Dunkleosteus is speculated to only have thick armored plating surrounding its head, whereas a Boneshark is completely covered in armored plating. Note that I say speculated. I say this because very little is preserved of the Dunkleosteus, and thus we have to speculate to some extent on what the species of Dunkleosteus genus might have looked like. However, we can be fairly certain that the Dunkleosteus only had armor around its head, because that is the only body part of the animal that has been well preserved. This is quite common when it comes to harder parts of bodies like teeth and bones. They tend to leave much harder prints when it comes to fossilization. For those reasons, I will assume that the Dunkleosteus only had armor around its head from this point onwards. Now, finally, onto why I want to bring up why the Dunkleosteus genus only had armor on their heads. Well, for one, it protects the most vulnerable parts of their bodies, that being their brains. The other reason their bodies weren't completely covered in armor plating is because it would impede their ability to swim and maneuver. This in turn would be much more difficult for them to hunt prey. With this in mind, you might have already guessed what my first problem is with the Boneshark. The fact that the creature is completely covered in bony plates would more than likely impede on the Boneshark's ability to hunt and swim. This would be particularly harmful for the Boneshark, since it is clearly not the apex predator of the environment it inhabits, making it easier prey for larger predators. The second issue with the bony plates has most to do with the fact that the Boneshark's teeth. Once again, comparing it to the Dunkleosteus, we will see that the Dunkleosteus didn't have teeth per se. Instead, what it had was a jaw that worked more like a pair of scissors that would cut through soft tissue and crush harder tissue. The Boneshark's teeth might be able to hold on to prey, but it would have problems regenerating broken teeth. It would also find difficulties in actually cutting out the meat it is biting through. This is a problem that the Dunkleosteus would not suffer from because of the shape of its jaw. The second problem that is already mentioned is that the armored skeleton would impede the creature's ability to move. In order to make the sudden bursts of speed that the Boneshark needs to be able to hunt, it is going to need a body that is able to make precise and strong movements. The plates would also decrease how streamlined the Boneshark is. If we look at the scales of fishes, or perhaps more fittingly on modern sharks, we might notice something about their scales. I have discussed in a previous video that sharks have a very specific shape on their scales that allow them to be some of the most streamlined animals in the animal kingdom. Something that we have picked up on and quickly stolen by implementing it into something called shark swimsuits. These are somewhat notoriously allowed in swim competitions, and they were found to be such an extreme utility that it was borderline impossible for swimmers to win without them. Eventually they were classified as technical doping and outright banned. So what is the point of all this? Well, it illustrates how effective the scales of the shark can be in order to reduce the amount of energy needed to move quickly through the water. This, combined with the shape of a modern shark, allows them to be some of the fastest animals in the ocean living today. But what does all of this have to do with the Boneshark, I hear you ask? Well, the plates that are covering the Boneshark's body are visibly reducing the streamlining of the animal by giving it several large bumps and hills along its body. And the close-ups of the scale that can be seen in the in-game databank do not resemble the shape of scales that modern sharks have. As a result, it will take the creature far more energy than is necessary to be able to generate the speed that it needs. So the bony exoskeletons are not unrealistic, though it could be made realistic relatively easily. Simply a change that I would have made is that the Boneshark only has bony plates around its head and jaw. Let's talk about the eyes of the Boneshark. The main function of these seems to be the ability to spot prey that make use of bioluminescence, and the Boneshark doesn't seem to have any bioluminescence of its own. This is not an entirely uncommon phenomenon, but there are of course some predators in the animal kingdom that make use of what you might call torchlights to help them spot predators or prey. Instead, what I also want to talk about is how the Boneshark might be able to find its prey if it can't see it. The ridges in front of the Boneshark's eyes do resemble what might be multiple sets of nostrils. This, like the multiple sets of eyes, is something that doesn't seem to have been developed on our own planet, but it is possible for it to have developed on an alien world. The problem I have with this is the shape of the nostrils. If we, once again, return to our modern sharks and look at the nostrils, we might notice something about them that looks somewhat different compared to the bone sharks. The difference is that the modern sharks have front-facing nostrils, whereas the bone shark has rear-facing nostrils. This causes a big problem for the bone shark. See, front-facing nostrils that our sharks have help the sharks by pushing the water through the nostrils and helps them detect scents in the water. The additional flaps around the nostrils help to reduce the friction that would otherwise be caused by the nostrils. The back-facing nostrils of the bone shark would certainly have reduced friction, but it would not aid in detecting scents. In fact, it would be rather difficult for the bone shark to detect scents unless it was somehow able to swim backwards and did so every time it wanted to follow a scent. So it's another problem with the bone shark that makes it unrealistic. So is there anything realistic about it? Difficult to say, so let's keep going. The territorial attitude of the bone shark is rather interesting. It is rare for fishes to harbor territories and live in packs. Currently we don't know of any fishes or sharks that live in pack. There are, however, theories. Some of these theories revolve around some bigger sharks like the great white sharks. The theory goes that the sharks have some kind of internal organizations among themselves that determine who gets to eat first when large prey is found, or sometimes they coordinate themselves to do more effectively hunt prey, like seals. At this time, none of this has been confirmed, but there is certainly some evidence to support that they might be able to make some sort of coordination amongst themselves. But there is also evidence to support that this is not the case. Now, when we compare this to the bone sharks, we might immediately discover an issue. And that issue is that bone sharks lay eggs, and they don't seem to watch over their eggs. This makes it a lot more unbelievable that the bone shark is able to form packs and actually stay together. There are of course predatory fishes that form schools, but they don't seem to have formed any sort of family groups or anything that resemble packs that dolphins or killer whales form. But speaking of whales and dolphins, let's talk about the screeching that the bone shark makes when it attacks the player, either when the player is free swimming or using the sea moth. For gameplay, this does have its uses, but as per usual I will not be taking this into consideration. Dolphins and killer whales do make usage of sonar as a means of communication between themselves and as a means of fighting prey, but this is not used when they are approaching the prey. The reason for this is because it will give away the location of the dolphins and the killer whales and make it much harder for them to hunt. It does sometimes happen that younger individuals don't keep quiet though. The bone shark, on the other hand, screams the moments before it bites down on whatever prey it is hunting, and now I am realizing that the stalker also suffers from this issue. The problem that comes with both the stalker and the bone shark is that making noises is essentially announcing their incoming attacks and will reduce the chances of them catching their prey. In summary, the screaming that the Boneshark makes is very unrealistic. The pack that it forms are rather unbelievable. So what other features of the Boneshark? Well, the one thing that might be realistic about the Boneshark is the shape of the tail. As discussed in the Stalker video, the tail is something that it might have developed on an alien planet and might share a common ancestor with stalkers because of the shape of the tail. But all in all, there's very little I find realistic about the Boneshark. The scales covering its body would make it more likely to sink to the ocean floor than be able to swim as gracefully as it does. The shape of the nostrils would make it difficult for the Boneshark to catch scents. The packs are unlikely to be formed, and the screams it makes before striking might make it even miss whatever it's trying to hunt. All in all, a rather unrealistic creature in Subnautica. That's all I had for you today. If you liked the video, make sure to like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you all next time. Goodbye.